Hello, my name is Shannon Biggs, and I'm the Community Rights Director at Global Exchange. We're an international human rights organization based in San Francisco, California, United States. And our work is really different than some international human rights organizations in that our work is focused on root causes of injustice and being an organization standing in solidarity with indigenous communities and peoples of the global south. And we're about 25 years old. And about 25 years ago, our founders spent a lot of time in Latin America and in Africa and other places and said, what can we do? How can we help? And they said, well, go home first and you live in the belly of the beast. And you need to educate the people where you come from about the impacts of what the decisions that your corporations and your governments are having on peoples of the world. So with that, we're a very grassroots organization. So I wear two hats. One as a very happy member of a global solidarity network of allies, of which I'm in great company here today, as well as a grassroots community organizer around ideas of community rights, stripping corporations of their so-called rights, and recognizing the rights of nature. And in that process, I'm here to talk a little bit about economics. And as a grassroots community organizer, for instance, I work in California, and Mount Shasta has a beautiful sacred mountain that if you sit and listen quietly, you can hear her hum. And it also has a beautiful ancient aquifer, some of the oldest, purest water on the western half of the United States, and springs up from the ground into three rivers. And Nestle Corporation, who many of you know, were wanting to come in and bottle water, sell that water around the world, as well as other corporations that wanted to use as a commodity these things from deep within the earth that have taken millennia to build and to grow and to accumulate and that nourish and feed us. And they wanted to stop the water withdrawal. They wanted to stop this other process called cloud seeding, where corporations control the weather in order to make it rain where they want it to rain and not in other places. And they wanted to stop all this, but one of the things that was hooking them up was this idea of, well, what about the jobs? What are we going to do? Nestle promises all these jobs, and if we chase away these corporations, what kind of economy do you have? What are your solutions for that? And in other communities, as Linda was talking about, that places that want to be models of self-sufficiency, and they want to reduce their food shed. They want to, have their food come from local sources, and they want to not depend on water from other places, and they want to stop unwanted development and extraction projects and all these things that all communities have to face. And one of the things, they spent 10 years actually on a city plan to be able to do that. They really sat and thought as a community about what it was that would get them to that place. And one of the things that they ran into was that it was the law itself that makes that kind of self-sufficiency illegal. You can't stop GMOs from coming into your community. You can't promote just local, you can't just buy local food in our United States society. All of these things, you can't stop development. If a corporation buys a piece of property and has a legal permit to do some unwanted activity, the law says you can't say no. So the thing that these communities that want to not just say no to the things that they don't want, but also to say yes to the things that they do want, we're finding that it is in fact the structure of law that says that they can't do that, can't be sustainable or self-sufficient. We have factory towns, of course, like every place, where the only job in town is related to that factory. And all of these communities come to me and they say, well, what kind of economy can we have if we say no to the kinds of industry, the kind of jobs that industry has to offer? How will we live? We've lost our relationship with, we don't know how to create a local economy rooted in rooted in the ways of nature. We don't know how to do that. We don't know how to transition from where we are now to the place where we need to go. And so I thought about that a lot over the time. And as in the lead up to the Rio Plus 20, Earth Summit, thank you. That was a focus of a lot of conversation, especially as the United Nations was promoting this idea of the so-called green economy, which is based on putting a price tag on nature and the things that she does for us. And how do we as communities, how do we confront this onslaught into our communities and into our homes and into our lives, and how do we find that balance? And it also, so we went to Rio. We had conversations with people all over the world about this. We put together a report actually on the green economy, the United Nations green economy, which several people here have contributed to. I have a few copies in English if you'd like to take a look, called Rights of Nature, Planting Seeds of Real Change, talking about things from around RED, looking at payment for ecosystem services, and just generally our relationship with the world that we live in. It's also available online, but I do have a few copies. As a real beginning to open the conversation, what is the kind of economy that nature wants, that nature needs? And as a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, who I asked her one time, how is it that indigenous peoples have maintained this relationship with the land, and the white settler populations didn't? And she told me her creation story of the ships that set sail with their original instructions, and the one ship that got lost and lost their way. And that's which I thought was a very kind narrative. Very loving narrative, in fact. And so, for those of us who have lost our instructions, how do we begin to repair that? How do we begin to create that change in the face of the world that we live in? So I put together a summit last October, including people from around the world, to have this conversation about rights of nature and the economics of the biosphere. What does that look like? Because ecological economics, there's many branches of economics that are really focused on how do you fit nature around the economy that we have, instead of saying, how do we step back and say, how do we listen to the earth and create the kind of economy that nature has to offer us?